of the agenda. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? There being none, we'll carry on. Did you need a mover and a seconder for the agenda, Becca?
Yes, please.
Sorry, Bunty and Angela. Thank you.
And also, can I just note, sorry, Mayor Paula, Dave McPherson is having problems connecting as well. So can we just put an apology in as well, retrospectively for him until he arrives?
Okay.
Becca, can you hear me, Becca? Hello,
sorry?
It's Rob here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just having trouble. It still says it's waiting to load me up. But okay, I'll
Shouldn't be too far away, Rob.
I am on anyway. It just says waiting on my screen.
Okay, we can hear you though. So and you're on
Thank
my
you.
left.
Okay.
So that's
Thank you.
okay. So we declarations of interest. There are none. Public forum. Becca, do we have any?
Yes, so we have. There was a submission that I circulated earlier from Go Eco in relation to COVID-19 community funding, item 7. We will be attaching that written submission to the minutes of this meeting for the public to view that, but I will take it that councillors have had some time to read that submission. We also have someone who will be zooming into the meeting, Holly Snake, speaking on behalf of the community Waikato, item 7. Amy, has Holly joined us yet?
I don't see her. No.
Holly is on the line. She's here. Yep.
Sorry. Okay. So that's for item 7, though, isn't it?
Yes, just speaking in relation to item 7
on
behalf of community Waikato.
Okay, so we haven't. Anna's was the circulated one, and Holly's is the spoken one.
Correct.
So we'll take that now. Holly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paula. Look, apologies in advance. I've literally found out about today about half an hour ago, so I hadn't actually written anything down, but I do have some thoughts. In the first instance, wanted to thank Council very much for their contribution to the community at this time. Obviously, a lot of the organisations are under extreme pressure. We're seeing significant new need beyond what our organisations are currently resourced for, and on top of that, we've seen a number of organisations having to suspend service because they don't have in place the resources or the procedures to be able to keep themselves, their volunteers, and also the public safe. And because of that, we're seeing other services needing to grow, to expand, to be able to take up the space and ensure that people are getting what it is they need. So we were really pleased to see Council be so active and responsive. We think the criteria that's been applied is really thoughtful. Absolute credit to your team who have put thought into that as well. I think it really demonstrates an in-depth understanding of the situation at a community level. In terms of civil defence response, I'm sure most.
Sorry, Holly. Sorry, Paula. Can I get you? There's a whole lot of tapping and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Can we go back to that? Those that aren't speaking, mute their things.
Yeah. So if you're not speaking at the moment, Holly is. But if you're not, can you make sure you're on mute, just so that we don't hear the clicking and typing and things? Off you go, Holly.
Thank you. If you're not aware, Civil Defence has made an announcement around food. Civil Defence will provide food providers with access to additional food. So that has freed up our community funders a little bit in their own criteria around what it is they fund. There may be instances where community organisations are denied access to that, but I think it will be very rare when it happens. So what the funders have been talking about is redirecting that funding into other services around transport, domestic violence, mental health, accommodation, and those sorts of things. So it is helpful because food was one of the greatest needs, and so it is going to free up the funding, which is fantastic. I also wanted to give you a bit of a heads up about what the community sector response is more generally. We've been working in collaboration with a number of organisations, including Hamilton City Council Community Development staff, the WISE Group, DIA, Salvation Army, various organisations like this, We've managed to pull together very quickly a website which is being branded Here to Help You. Unfortunately, Here to Help was already gone as a domain name, so it's Here to Help You. It's going to provide access to some of those key social services, first of all within the Hamilton area. We're currently populating the database now. It's a way to be able to get very immediate grassroots services to individuals who need it. That is having a bit of a soft launch on Friday, and we expect it to be up and running for the community by Monday. So it's come together very quickly, but from our perspective, it looks like it's going to be an absolutely fantastic tool for grassroots community. It's also intended to have a long-term presence as well. We see it existing well beyond this immediate pandemic. So I think that's really all I wanted to say. It was, in the first instance, massive thank you guys for putting that money forward. It is going to be, I think, essential. I suppose a bit of a heads up too that we anticipate that this is not going to last the 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. We see the impact on community organisations and on people going forward to be obviously a lot longer.
Thank you. And we won't take questions at this time because we've got a lot of business to get through, Holly, but well, thank you very much for the part that you've played in the other philanthropic trusts, because we couldn't have done it without you guys in the game. You're the deliverers of the service and we're helping provide some resource. So that's a really good combination. We're enabling you to do the work that you must do, and you do so well. So thank you. And we're really pleased to be alongside you for this. You're welcome to, of course, stay in and listen to the meeting. It's a public meeting. It's also being, and taking the point of Anna Casey-Cox in her written submission about being as transparent and open as possible. This is being recorded and can be listened to, which is the best we can do at this point in time for Zoom. So we're doing our very best. Are you going to say something else on that, Becca?
We're actually live streaming the meeting as well. Yeah.
So we are. We're looking at the stream and live streaming as well.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what we're about, transparency. So no, in all seriousness, thank you again. And we look forward to working with you closely over the next 4 to 5 weeks and out and beyond in the longer term for our people. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we've got the confirmation of the extraordinary minutes of 27th. Is there a mover or a seconder? I'll just get rid of that. Angela moves, Councillor Hamilton, Ryan seconds. All in favour? Opposed? Anyone opposed? Let me just check the hands. No, Becca, there are no hands opposed. Is that okay?
Yep, sorry, we've just got to get the mic stuff sorted. Yes, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the Chair's report in the agenda. Oh gosh, have I got it? Just give me a second, councillors, to pull it the right one up. I have to find it again. Apologies. So I can't look at diligent and be on the thing at the same time.
Yeah. So councillors, it's page 19 of the agenda.
Yeah. I'm just opening the file. I think. Okay. Page 19. It is pretty self-explanatory. Oh, it's 19. I'm trying to get to 19.
Did you want me to just run through, Paula, what's covered in the Chair's report?
You run through it while I try and navigate this. I apologise.
So, sure thing. So, me, Paula's Chair's report just outlines Māngai Māori Bella Takiari Braham's resignation, and outlines the process that we'll go through to recruit someone to replace that role. We've also got a piece in there covering the Hearings and Engagement Committee Deputy Chair. Councillor O'Leary has requested to be replaced in her role as she's got a huge portfolio to look after. Councillor Gallagher is supportive of this move and would like to nominate Councillor Wilson to replace Councillor O'Leary as Deputy Chair on the Hearings and Engagement Committee. We've also outlined a number of reports that need to be deferred formally. which are covered in the Chair's report. This is just because I've had formal resolutions for them to come back to a specific date to a council or committee meeting, so we just need to follow through with a formal resolution to defer them. All of the ones that don't have resolutions to come back to a certain date but we're due to come back will just be automatically deferred to the next relevant committee or council meeting. Any questions on that, councillors?
Councillors, if you wave your little hand, no questions. It's all very straightforward. So I haven't got the recommendation in front of me, Becca, because the numbers are different on the looking at the PDF. Sure.
So the recommendation is just that that we note Bella's resignation, that we approve Councillor Wilson to replace Councillor O'Leary as Deputy Chair of the Hearings and Engagement Committee, and that we approve to defer the following reports: the Alcohol Control Bylaw Policy Report, Hamilton Gardens Management Plan Report, Residential Housing Options, Ruakura Road West Expressway Connection, Waipa District Council and HCC growth discussions, and road naming issues and policy review. So all of the dates for those reports where they're being deferred to are outlined in the report and the agenda.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Mark?
My apologies.
Can't hear you. Back on mute.
Stuff. There we go. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Things like the there's a couple of items in there I would have thought would have come back to committee meeting anyway, like the gardens plan, etc. Is there a reason that's going back to council or not, and not the committee?
For the gardens one, I understand that was always coming back to council meeting.
I think, yeah, if I remember rightly, it was because of timing, but that seems to have gone out the window. I'm quite relaxed about it either way.
Yeah. We can have a look into it. If we need to defer it back to the committee meeting, we can always do that via a future Chair's report. But I understand, just not having the information in front of me straight away, that the resolution was for that to come back to a council meeting. I think that is with the significance of it as well, being a politically significant decision, maybe that's also a reason why it's coming back to council, and because it's been previously dealt with via council. But again, I'm happy to relook at where that needs to come back to.
3 days. Okay, if you get back to me, that'd be great.
If
Thanks.
I could just jump in there, it's also because it was a deliberations report back from the hearings committee. So that was sort of where that's happened. But Becca and I will have a look at that just to make sure we've got the mechanics of that right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm happy to move the suite of recommendations there. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Any debate?
Paula, I've been wanting to ask a question for a while. Sorry.
Okay.
Dave.
Can you put your little wave your hand thing?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nobody's got their hands waving at the moment.
I have.
Not on my screen. But sorry. Yep. Okay. No, I mean not your physical hand. Your little raise your hand thing. But anyway,
I did both.
Oh. IT, it just does your head in sometimes. I know you love it, Dave, but anyway, yes, go.
Thanks. Look, just a question through you to Lance, if I could, on the residential house options. No problems with the suggestion, but a request that you notify, I can't remember the name of Christine, what's her name's group, but you notify them of that delay, or someone does, so that they're not left wondering why we haven't dealt with it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. Maria and Emily have been in contact with Christine Norris and her group, but I'll just follow up on that to make sure that that's happened and reiterated with everything that's gone on in the last couple of weeks.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Is there any debate? All in favour, please raise your hand. I'll just see if there's anybody without a raised hand. Oh, hang on. Whoops. Have you got your hand raised, Ryan? Oh, yeah. That is everyone. There's no one without a hand up, Becca.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get back to the agenda now. Run sheet. Okay. Sorry, I am actually having legitimate IT issues today. So we've now done my report, and we move on to item 7, the COVID Community Funding Response General Criteria Guidelines, which is Andy and Lance.
Morena councillors, just really take the report as read and really happy to answer any questions. We as a combined funders group have been looking at applications for a week now, and so there's currently been 21 applications made to that combined fund with a total request of just over $1.1 million. Lots of that has been around food, probably just over 60% of that fund has been related to the immediacy of food needs. So some of the civil defence response will assist that funding group, but really just want to kind of paint the picture that there is great appreciation for council being a part of this process and supporting the community organisation this way. But happy to answer any questions that jump out of the report.
Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Don't see any hands up. Oh, Margaret. Okay, let me see. Margaret.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Just in light of the information presented by Holly this morning, and you repeating that also about the CD response and contribution towards food. So what will our focus around that funding now be? Are we still going to be targeting food, or are we going to be focusing on something else? That's a great need.
So in terms of what's been defined by central government as essential social services, there is the food element, which is food banks, but also the provision of emergency food. Civil defence is probably the not the first point of call for a lot of that stuff. There's the mental health awareness and people being able to get support to counsellors and the other mechanisms to make sure that people are healthy. We've got essential social services around the response of domestic violence and those keeping people safe. There's the accommodation element, those that need support because of whether it's displacement or they need temporary or accommodation support of whatever mechanism. And so the food is one element, but it's only a part of that essential social services. So if I look at some of the applications that have come in from really significant Hamilton organisations, there's lots that are in that mental health provision space. There's lots in the keeping people safe from a refuge perspective or a night shelter perspective. So food is a bit, but it's not the only part. And so of the applications that have been processed to date or that have come in, the bulk of the money still exists as a need, even if it was picked up by somebody else. To date, there's been $440,000 gifted out from that combined funders pool. So it's definitely moving and getting to those organisations that need it.
Thank you, Andy. I just wondered if I could thank you for that answer around accommodation elements, mental health awareness, response to domestic violence. I'd really like, so what I'd like to do is to be able to go to my community and say, okay, here's the $1 million fund. Food is still being allocated, or food granting and funding is still being allocated, but these are the other areas that we are targeting that you can apply for as well. So I can go back to my community and say those things that you just said: accommodation, response to domestic violence, mental health awareness, counsellors, and refuge. Yes.
That's correct. Those elements of what's essential social services are still operating because we want to be healthy and safe. So that's good.
Thank you. And you talked about a number of large organisations. Is this fund open to smaller organisations as well?
Before COVID-19 level 4 was enacted, as funders, we talked about who are those organisations that are on the ground in the region who are able to meet the immediate needs of people and who will most likely be impacted by the pandemic. There was a list of just under 100 organisations that were identified by the funders. conversations have happened, and as of this morning, there's 121 organisations that meet that criteria of actually working with people still in this level 4 environment, but also who have been impacted severely by increased demand for services and resources. So there are some small ones. For instance, within Hamilton, there's definitely some of the smaller organisations who are participating in that, but there are the big ones as well who are just feeling the pressure. I was talking to one organisation today, and they've had a 100% increase in what they normally did last week to what they're doing now in terms of trying to meet people's immediate needs. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, just feeding back to you, I did hear Holly mention transport, and whether that I understand that there are people in need of transport options to get to food banks, to get to a COVID testing facility. And if you can't drive, or you don't have access to a vehicle, or your warrant has run out and you don't have funds for a bus, then their ability to utilise the support that's already there is really compromised, and they are missing out. So just feeding that back, that's also a growing need. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ryan next.
Thanks, Paula. Just a question, Andy, and apologies if I haven't picked it up through the document, but does this committee just decide on council's contribution, or does it decide on all the funds that are getting funneled in?
Within the criteria and guidelines of both councillors Bunting and Nigel Rolfe and myself, would just be for council's 1 million. As funders, we are meeting every day to kind of look at the applications that are coming through and the correspondence from other organisations that are coming in, and there's a little bit of a collective conversation of where should this best be resourced from, but the three of us would just be looking at a council's million and how that would be spent.
Because at the moment, there's three primary funders: council, Trust Waikato, and Well Energy, was it?
So each of those three have put forward $1 million, and then there's other funders, including D.B. Bryant, Gallagher's, Bramer, and Len Reynolds, who have put forward other amounts as well. So there's about $3.3 million in that collective pot.
Okay, and so if a group, say, wanted 40 grand, one of those other funders might say, look, we'll only give them 10, and you guys might say, no, we're going to give them 20, and that sort of thing?
It has worked out that way, yes, where there's been the conversation around because of individual funders' priorities and mandates, some of them go, we would like to support that organisation, and so that there's a little bit of that, how do we use the putia to the best advantage?
Nice.
There's also examples where organisations gone, actually, so Trust Waikato have done a couple where it's been a rural organisation where they are the only one within their region, and so they've said we'll fully fund that organisation. So it's kind of could work both ways.
Okay, and just in terms of the reporting back to council, I'm not wanting to get silly with it, but would you envisage something like a one-pager once a week or something, just to give us visibility as to the need and the response?
We can work our report into whatever's easiest. We're working from a funder's perspective on Teams, so there's really good visibility across what the applications look like and what different organisations are funding towards those organisations. So we can provide a one-pager. We can come to a meeting with a report. So I guess we're open to making sure that the communication flows to best meet your guys' needs.
Just in terms of general feedback from previous meetings we've had as elected members, I think something that's accessible via email is quick and easy, in terms of less Zoom reporting, etc.
Okay, so we'll just go through the questions. Let me just have a look next. When you've done your questions, can you unhand your hand? Rob's next. Rob? Are you there? Rob Pascoe?
He is. He's on mute.
Is he? He needs to. Rob? Rob, you're on mute.
He's good now.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I thought at the time that we approved this amount, we were going to work with the other groups. What I'm getting from the answer to Ryan's questions is that we appear to be all the groups, the Waikato, the Energy, the Well Trust, and like are working in different silos. Has it not been possible to try and work together so that we get the best bang for our buck as do the other funders?
We absolutely are working together, Councillor. So every organisation in terms of philanthropic trust has its own processes. So, for instance, we're really aware that our council money isn't just available for it to be put on the table and others to make the decision. Part of today's report is saying, how do we make the decision around our money? Other trusts have trustees, and so they've got delegated authority to different ways. There is a daily conversation between the funders. There's also a daily conversation between the advisors. So we are on the same page and we are collectively working together. So it's not a siloed approach. It is very much aware that we actually have our own processes that we need to hit and make sure that from an audit perspective holds true in time, but we are on the same page and we are collaborative in the way that we talk and the way that we fund.
So do you think it's going to work that way? It's going to work well that way? Or would we be better to remove and take the risk of perhaps not having control over our $1 million, but letting one of those groups who have a similar criteria to us dispense the $1 million fund that we have approved?
I think it is working incredibly well. If council made the decision for us to give our $1 million to Well Energy and let them make the decisions, then that would also work. We would still be able to sit at that table. But I think the process that we've put in place would ensure that we are close to the requests for those organisations within Hamilton City, and also are able to, with assurance, know that we are funding things that are, improving the well-being of our city people.
Okay, so who's in the Waikato Funders Group? You mentioned that in the report, but specify who
in terms of the individuals who sit at that?
Yeah, who the group comprises.
So Trust Waikato, Well Energy, DV Bryant's, Len Reynolds, the Gallagher's Foundation, the Regional Council, Bramer, DIA, ourselves, Momentum Waikato.
It's quite good, quite comprehensive.
And so we've got all the groups that are actually funding and or feel that they want to be part of that group in that group?
Absolutely. There's other conversations with in terms of our tainui and how that works. Sorry, I forgot the Tyndall Foundation as well in that group. But absolutely, we've got the people who want to be a part of a collaborative response. There's really good intel being shared from what's going on and what's needed, both with across the region, but in terms of tangible responses of how things are moving quickly. So we heard around the DIA we heard from the Civil Defence announcement while we were in the Zoom, because we've got people who are connected right the way through. So the conversation is not stagnant or slow. It's very much live in real time with the right people.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And one final question. Assuming that we appoint our 3 reps, yourself and the 2 councillors, how do you see our group participating with the funders group?
The way that I've envisioned and spoken with councillors Bunting and Naidurov, would be that I would participate as the manager in those daily Zooms. I've got the Teams thing, so I can see when an application comes through. I can get the application from an organisation and I can share it with both councillors. We could have a daily Zoom for us to go, this is what we would like to support, and then I can feed that back through both the Teams documents and then also in the next daily Zoom with the managers. We, from a staff perspective, use the Smarty Grants online platform. So when we were to gift a group some of the funding, we would contact them and they would jump onto our Smarty Grants thing so that we'd have that audit trail as well. But staff would take care of that post the decision, which we could do on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your answers.
Thank you. I'll just see who's next. Unhand yourself, Rob, and I've got Mark next. Mark.
There we go. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Just one quick question, Andy, and thanks for the work you've done on this. I was just looking there at the turnaround time. Decision letters going out in 3 days. Now, you're not sort of saying that's going to take 3 days for us to send a letter, are you? I mean, how quickly are we going to have this turnaround?
So I guess process-wise, a group jumps onto Trust Waikato's website, they fill out an application form. That could be at 8 o'clock tonight. So tomorrow that would be picked up by the advisors from Trust Waikato. They would talk with the advisors from Well Energy and our advisors as well, DIAs. That would get put into the Teams thing. We would look at the process. We would look at that application tomorrow. We would talk about it on Zoom. We would make our decision and report back either end of tomorrow or Monday, and a letter would be generated. So there's a little bit of that lag of application coming in, conversation made, and then we move on out. So 3 days is the outside of which we'd want to be able to give the organisation surety of whether their request is going to be successful or not.
Yeah, because there'll be time in there, I guess, for further questions and for us to go to the other. So some of them are the larger ones where are being partially funded by different groups. That's where we can have discussions with the funders as well, I presume.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. No, cool. Thank you. It's thanks for the work on it. It's yeah, exciting.
Okay, so now I have Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Andy, you said right at the start that we've, and thanks to Ryan for clearing up the question around actually exactly what we allocate. So we're allocating our own fund. You said there were 21 applications already for 1.1 million. So one can say that the fund's already overprescribed.
Sorry, Councillor, that's 21 for 1.1 from that combined 3.25 million.
Oh, okay. So how many, do you know how many applications have we received for our portion of the fund?
So there's been 9 applications from organisations who are based in Hamilton. They've requested 537,000, of which just under 180,000 has been granted. So there's still a request of 358,000 from those 9 organisations sitting on the table.
Okay. And are there, because it's by invitation only, isn't it? So we would have a comprehensive list of all stakeholders. Have you received applications from all the groups so far that you were expecting?
That list is a growing list. There's currently 127 organisations on that regional list, and we've only received applications from 21. Some of the organisations on that list we know are preparing. They're just kind of spent this weekend a sense of what the request and the need would be. Others have, even though they're on that list, are actually shut down and so won't be requesting money. So there's a little bit of a combination of both.
Yeah, and I noticed there's nothing in the criteria that we're discussing, or will be when we go back to the report, around, you know, those I guess those organisations and groups that have been part of our community for such a long time and have done great work. whereas there's nothing that would prioritise them other than the three of you making that as a decision, as opposed to, say, some smaller groups out there that I guess perhaps like in the mental health space that have a great need, but sort of haven't really accessed our funds or been part of our discussions and conversations and stuff over the years. So how can you just tell me how you'll manage that?
So the nature of this particular fund is slightly different to other funds that we've had. Most funds that we as council administer, we have an opening and a closing, and we get to see the whole portfolio of applications, and therefore some of that prioritisation takes place at that assessment level and the allocation level, because we get to see the full diversity of what the need is. This one being a bit of a rolling fund would mean that we would be prioritising the conversations of what's in front of us. So currently, if council was to approve the criteria and guidelines and the process of councillors Bunting, Naidu, Rolf, myself being the allocation committee, we would have immediate work of looking at the 9 organisations that have applied, and so we would be able to prioritise within that. There is a couple of smaller organisations and a couple of bigger organisations in that 9. But then I guess we would be a little bit reliant on what comes in tomorrow and what comes in next week and how we roll.
I understand that. I guess my concern there is on a first come, first term basis, those well-known organisations that provide the critical care, which is food and shelter first and foremost, might be so busy on the ground that they would not be in the first come, first serve. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that as a criteria. And then I guess secondly, there's also under that, Andy, there's nothing again that puts food and shelter as immediate needs. There's nothing in the criteria. We've listed, food, shelter, I can't find the page now. There's all sorts of things in there. So yeah, I'm not too sure on a first come, first term basis how we can manage that.
I guess part of the conversation is that growing list of 127 organisations have had contact. So whether that's a Trust Waikato, a Well Energy or a City Council advisor, there's been contact to see how the groups are doing and how they're faring and what the growing concerns or gaps might be. So it's not just a fund that's been opened up to see who might apply. There is the conversation behind that. So we do currently across the region, there's been the 21 applications, but there's other applications that we know of are coming because of those conversations. In terms of the immediate impact of COVID-19 on some organisations, we know what this last week has brought or the last month has brought, but for some it is still an evolving field as to how much are they able to reprioritise their normal work and therefore cover versus how much is needed to be new responses or just an increased level of demand. So some of those organisations that we go, we'd love to fund, may come to the point where they don't need to be funded because they've been able to reprioritise their workforce and their volunteers, whereas others are already knocking at the door because they've seen the need or they've been impacted to date. So we're pretty comfortable that it's not a faceless process, but it is a one that's got deep conversation between our community groups and our funders.
Yeah, I guess again, thanks for that, Andy, but I'm just a bit, I understand, but I'm concerned at the first come, first term, first in.
Yeah.
So can I ask, I think Angela raises a really good question there. We've had people through social media and so on, which is where we're touching base with the world mostly, talking about things like, are we going to see increased mental health aspects around people, because anxiety is quite high, and we're going to see some more extreme mental health issues that don't quite, with the health system straining. So I think that's where you're going from, Angela, isn't it? Is there any way to make sure that the love is spread across not just the immediate needs of, shelter and food and advice, getting your medication, getting to the chemist, all of those things, but also those other things like if you are suffering from extreme anxiety and your mental health situation is exacerbated by let's face it, we're all under more stress than normal in our lives because of this. How do we make sure that those groups, for example, if you like Alzheimer's, for example, all the people with dementia, and can we be sure that those organisations are able to continue to support the families that are dealing with people with dementia and so on? Because they usually tend to be far down the rank in terms of struggling for funding. I'm not sure. Did I get you right, Angela?
Not a yes and no, but I guess because it's the first come first serve basis, I'm concerned that the two primary things, food and shelter, that some well-known organisations that provide that for the city might miss out if they're so busy on the ground doing what they need to do. On a first come first serve basis, suddenly the fund is done and dusted and we haven't heard from them.
And I'm worried about the ones that aren't resourced until later in the need. Andy, in terms of, you remember how we were going to put up the full $1 million, but we indicated we didn't have to spend the full $1 million all in one go and that this would be reviewed. Is there any way to hold back a portion to give this time to rumble through so that we say we do a decent chunk of work now, but there's a portion that comes in later that gives us the ability to see if anybody's been missed or there's a gap, or does that kind of thing work?
I think from an allocation committee of funding, that there'll be decisions that have to be made, prioritising each thing as the phases of this level 4 changes. And so I think you're right. There are some organisations that are busy doing, and they will be reaching out, and there's others that are busy doing, and they'll reach out later. And part of the allocation committee's decision will be to figure out how to ensure that we get to support the fullness of that. I do know from the 21 organisations that have applied already, there is a cross-section of those who are working within the family violence space and protection space, those who are offering counselling services, those who are offering care packages, and those who are offering food and accommodation. So there has been a diversity already across the region in terms of some of those responses, but that's definitely a part of that process of making sure that we don't find ourselves in a position where we can't support those who we want to and need to. So yes.
Thank you. Kesh, you're leaving us now. We'll talk to you again later. Take care. Okay, thank you. Angela, are those your questions for now? Let me have a look on the list. I have got Maxine next. Maxine, you and then someone else. Maxine.
Okay, thanks, councillors. Your great questions, and Andy for your very fulsome answers. I just wanted to follow up on that conversation that you're having with Mayor Paula and Councillor O'Leary with regard to some of the organisations that we haven't heard from yet. And we have heard from Holly this morning talking about their anticipated much longer time frame that we're talking about too, and simply not the 4 weeks or even 6, but much longer and deeper. And that the limits of this fund will fast be reached. And if organisations who are busy doing and not putting in an application, is there a process that we have at all that can identify who they might be and to be able to make an approach to them around offering some support in putting together those applications in a consultative kind of a way?
Yep, guess I'd like to reiterate that the organisations who have been identified as significant social service providers who are actively engaged with the needs of our people, they have been contacted by the funding advisors of the regional funders, and part of that touching base is seeing how they're doing and what their needs are, and offering support to go through the process of putting forward funding applications. So one organisation that I'm aware of has not ever done a funding application. They've always relied on donations, and so they'll have a funding advisor step with them through the process and make sure that they're able to get that done, even though they're under extreme stress and pressure from increased need. So that service from a funding perspective, or a provision of funding, is always a part of it, that we help organisations put their best foot forward and don't make it burdensome, but make it an easier process. And that's really a reason why we have got the one application through Trust Waikato, is that rather than making organisations find where the funding is, coming through the one portal allows the funders to talk through it and have a collaborative response that's easier for the organisation, so that they're not weighed down by unnecessary bureaucracy or process.
Yeah, I saw the process guideline as you'd sent it out, and it looks really great, because timeliness is really important through this process, firstly in the most immediate issues, but also for some of those slower burns. The other question I have is with regard to our allocation committee, and the level of time commitment that's going to be required from you and my fellow councillors. Can you give us a bit of an understanding of what that might be?
We've currently, because applications have been received through Trust Waikato for a week now, there is a little bit of a build-up of organisations that have applied. So immediately there would be a bit of time to process through what the request looks like and how we could respond. Over the last week, there's probably been somewhere between 2 and 7 organisation applications that have come in a day. That's regionally. So from a city council perspective, in terms of our region and our geography, that's probably the biggest days. We had 3 applications that have come in. The application process from Trust Waikato is relatively straightforward of, please tell us what your need is. And so it's not about reading lots of reports. It's a little bit of that kind of brief overview. The organisations are all known organisations, so it's not a lot of fact finding and searching out who these people are. It is a little bit of understanding what their capacity is and what their need is. We, as a funding managers, we've got an hourly Zoom, and I'm probably on Teams. We go throughout the course of the day looking at the different data and applications that are coming through. But from a Councillors Bunting and Councillor Naidu Ralph, we're probably talking somewhere in that hour a day to go through the process and get the decisions and the allocation kind of made through. And then my team are resourced to be able to follow up with organisations and do the back of house stuff that will take a little bit more time.
Okay, and I guess this question's for Bunty, really. Do you think that that's well within your ability to be able to commit to?
Yeah.
And would you need any other support around that?
No, thanks, Maxine. No, look, 2 things. One, I'm not going anywhere. So we're anticipating the sort of 7 days a week, short calls each day of the week, just while this goes on, because needs, it's a bloody important thing to do, and we're ready for that. And look, as experience-wise, there's no dramas. I did that for 13 years on the Well Trust as well, so I've got a bit of a head start with some of these organisations and the grants process as well. So I can't speak for Kesh, but I'm here 7 days a week, ready to go. Did you hear any of that?
Thanks. Yeah,
oh, good.
that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paula, have we lost you?
Oh, Ewan, then Martin. Sorry.
Look, quick question, Andy. Look, thank you for all the work you do, first of all. Did I hear you say that clearly we haven't allocated any funds currently?
That's correct.
But I think I heard you say about $180,000 worth of requests have come in so far for the Hamilton City Council Fund.
So our council fund would be to support organisations who are based in Hamilton, helping Hamilton people. Of the 21 applications through Trust Waikato, 9 of those are from Hamilton-based organisations, which has totaled just over $500,000. Trust Waikato and Gallagher's Trust have allocated some of their money already to those organisations. So some of those organisations have been supported partially while we are getting our process and our timings sorted, as well as also in a similar space to us. So currently, Whale Energy and City Council haven't allocated money, but we're getting our process in line so that we can do it efficiently.
Thank you. Look, my concern has always been this is going to be a long journey. It's going to be a marathon, and that's why I suggested a 2-step process, because I think some of what Mayor Paula was talking about and some of what Councillor Max was talking about is there will be some organisations currently heads down and working hard and not having a lot of time for doing applications. And already we've seen a huge amount of quantum, at least, coming in the door. But my question is, how are you satisfying yourself, and then I guess Mark and Cash, that we're not duplicating? So particularly in areas of mental health, domestic violence, how are you going through a robust process and understanding that the multiple applications that are providing the same types of service aren't somewhat being duplicated?
The robustness of the fact that our funding advisors from across the region, so the group that is replicated from that manager's level has got advisors who are also looking at applications. We've got a team from a council perspective. My team are actively involved in understanding what organisations are doing and how they work in the ecosystem of the social wellbeing of our city. And so we've got awareness of the way that the land lies. And so when an application comes in, it's not a cold call in that respect. There's wealth of knowledge that goes into the processing of that and the discussion that happens from that. From a community Waikato DIA council conversation around what's happening with food, there's gaps that come up as organisations struggle or have increased demand, and so we're working collaboratively in that space. Equally, the conversations with our community houses and with our mental health and our counselling providers and our migrant services and our disabilities, there's lots of conversations that go on that ensure that great decisions are made. The fund is open to organisations that we know aren't working in siloed isolations. They're doing good work. From a counselling perspective, there may be multiple lines that are open and available for people to call for assistance. They're doing the same thing, but it gives people choice. So it's not necessarily duplication, because people might go, actually, I have affinity to that organisation or to that organisation. So sometimes there's need for multiple providers to be delivering what looks like the same thing, but actually that actually helps our people give sense of power and autonomy and decision making, that they're not forced into the one thing. So,
excuse me, councillors, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to just have to put the meeting into the hands of the Deputy Chair for about a quarter of an hour because I'm just receiving a call from a minister. I'll be back with you shortly, but obviously I'm not going to make the minister wait, so I'll duck out and just see what this is about. And I'll talk to you soon, and Jeff's taking over. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Andy, for that explanation. Please don't ever think my questions are not supportive of the fund. It's just trying to make sure there is a robustness in our process. So how do you then differentiate from business as usual? Because the criteria stipulates that we're not funding business as usual. So what process have you got in place that identifies and separates business as usual to an uplift in demand as a result of these circumstances the world is facing?
So I guess there's the two elements. One is the people knowledge and awareness. So when the application comes in, there will be descriptors of what the request is for. Then you've got the advisors and the managers who are aware of what normal looks like to some degree and what the request looks like. So there's been a couple of applications that have come in that have been declined because both of those processes of advisors and managers have gone, that's actually just paying for business as usual. So it's definitely not a process which goes, if you ask, you will receive. There is robust to the decisions.
Yes. Great. And I have confidence in you, and I have confidence in Mark and Cash. My last question is, at that meeting when the elected members are working with you to make a final decision, I just want to make sure that there is robust minutes supporting every decision, because I want to have the ability to go back and say, so your decision here for this quantum, how does that meet the criteria stipulated by both the government and us? Because we've sort of put a catch-all where we've defined certain things, basically what the government has defined. So I want to know if the committee says, okay, we're giving 60,000 to ABC Limited, it was voted unanimously and it meets these criteria, just so that, and by the sounds of the volume, that could be managed if you're dealing with one or two, maybe 3 or 4 applications a day. So give me some optics on how you're managing those records and how the votes,
So from from an audit perspective, within our Smarty Grants online platform, there is a tab that is around the decision, and there is always notes that are uploaded so that when we get requested by Audit New Zealand, how have we spent the money, they can see what applications have been paid. And if someone drills into the individual ones, they would see that that organisation got paid and that was the rationale for it. So as part of our funding process, there's always notes kept and things recorded as to decisions of why someone got funded and why someone didn't get funded. So from that perspective, we would absolutely be capturing the important data so that we aren't reliant on coming back and asking me in 12 months' time, why did we fund that organisation? So, yeah.
120, sorry, I know I said it was my last question. I'm going to be cheeky and ask one more. Did you say 127 organisations have been identified as broadly operating in this area of need? Is that for the entire region or for the city of Hamilton? If it's for the region, could you tell me how many there is in the city of Hamilton?
That is regionally. And off the top of my head, sorry, I don't have the data as to how many of that 127 operate in Hamilton. I could have a look and I could come back to you with what that is, but that is definitely regional. Yeah.
I'm not going to add that to your already busy schedule, but I do, as an observation, I do find it fascinating that we have so many, 127 organisations. However, if that's for the region, I'm assuming in every small town in the region there would be these. So I get that.
Yeah.
But at some stage, it would be interested in understanding how many there are in Hamilton. But not this year. I think you'll be busy.
All right, all done, Ewan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Martin.
Yes, look, just going back to Angela's question, first of all, great, you told me, Andy, it's a one-stop shop in terms of the portal which people make applications, albeit then it may go off into separate groups. I'm just thinking in terms of, Angela's used the example of Alzheimer's Society, health-related groups, particularly in the mental health wellbeing area. Can you, and obviously we have WISE, People's Projects, all of this, but can you just detail the interaction this group has with the Waikato DHB? Because obviously there's part of them which is the hospital base in terms of dealing with the pandemic and making preparations, etc. But they have a huge budget across the region in terms of funding series of health-related groups, plus they obviously have all their community outreach. Can you just specify what interaction, Andy, you have with the relevant parts of the DHB? Because obviously when someone makes an application, they will list their other funding streams and what work the DHB are doing in this area.
I need to come back to you with that one, Councillor, in terms of the specific DHB portal. So we don't have somebody in the funders group that sits, who works from the DHB, who sits there. So there'll be
respectfully, that's a worry. Respectfully, that's a worry, because the DHB across the region are huge funders on a contract basis with a whole range of groups. So we obviously acknowledge, as I said, the hospital component, which is and the COVID, all of that work. But there's a whole series, particularly in wellbeing, mental health areas and community organisations. And it seems strange that we would not have a hotline, that Kevin Snee would delegate the relevant key people in the DHB across population health, mental health, community, that we're not interacting. Bearing in mind that, of course, the DHB sit around that table of the so-called Waikato Plan. So they are supposed to be key partners.
Yeah,
can you get back to us on that?
We can do that. Yeah.
Done, Martin?
Well, I'm just okay. I'll move on, but I am expressing concern because I do think huge component. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Maxine, your hand's up. No.
Sorry, I need to take it off. Apologies.
All good. Now, are there any other questions there? I've just got a quick one, Andy. I don't want to prolong the questioning too much because you look like you're in a bit of a bad way with a heavy cold there. I just further a little bit to Martin and Ewan's questions. I just sort of wondered how we are aligning with government agencies in general in terms of ensuring, that there's a demarcation and no duplication. And the DHB thing does worry me a little bit there. Are government agencies ramping up as well in our area?
Absolutely. So you'll be aware of the Prime Minister's announcements around a whole range of support. So, our not-for-profit sector are equally able to get the wage subsidies that are on offer. So for those that have been impacted in a way that reduces their level of service or reduces their income, there's those portal. MSD is administering a $4.8 million fund to support community organisations with a quick response as well. DIA sits in our funding group as a part of that mechanism. There's also money that's gone from central government towards our whānau order and our Pacifica families in terms of some of their responses as well. So there's definitely work and knowledge of that. From a DHB perspective, you know, we're not funding organisations for the business as usual. It is for that increased response. And I'll follow up with our colleagues at the DHB to make sure that, you know, they're aware of what's going on and what they're doing, and we're aware of that. So we'll definitely chase those up. But there's definitely a sense that we are part of the picture as council, as a funder in the region, that we're not the answer, but we've got an ability with the small putia that we have to support the immediacy of needs of many of these not-for-profit organisations. So, you know, there's lots and lots of connection that's kind of taking place away from the funding table, but that intel is being fed into the funding table to ensure that the best decisions are being made with people's resources.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Look, I've got no more questions as far as I can see. We've got, councillors, we've got the recommendations, the staff recommendations on page 41. That is 3A, 3B, 3C and 3D. I have a mover, Councillor Bunting, and a seconder, Councillor O'Leary at this stage. So, Mark, would you like to speak to this?
There we go. You got that clearly? Yeah. Thank you. Look, I'll be very brief. First of all, I just want to thank councillors for getting it to this far in the first place. It shows, you know, what a compassionate and kind councillor we are, or council we are. And thank you, Andy, for doing this amidst your own crookness as well. I hope your health hangs in there a bit longer, mate, because we need you. Just to provide a little bit of comfort, just listening to some of the questions going around and the questions I've asked myself every day too. Look, we're no strangers to this. Before the allocation even gets to us to be considered, it goes through pretty much every funding organisation, the big ones in the Waikato already. So it's well cleansed by the time it gets to us. So there's no real fly-by-nighters that will come through. And when it comes to us, it will be a quick and robust process because it is a special process. If it gives you any more comfort, I'm happy to report back every time we do this. If you like, I can email you daily with everything we get if you want. If you don't, I won't bother you with it. But otherwise, we will get really, really regular reporting. Just to give some comfort to those people who wanted that extra step in the middle, because then you'll be able to see where it's tracking. And to give you an idea, I was talking last night to one major philanthropic group last night, and they have had they've just been swamped in the last week with an entirely new clientele of people who can't afford food all of a sudden, who have lost their jobs, who can't get to the butcher, who can't get to the greengrocer, and they don't have any money, and it's dramatically traumatic for them. So this is a very special fund. It's an extraordinary fund. It is entirely related to COVID-19 cases or things that have been affected by COVID-19 cases, and believe me, we will be rigorous. Kesh is one of the most well-connected councillors you have with the community. She knows absolutely everybody. So I have complete confidence in her skill. I spent 13 years, like I said, on the Well Trust doing just this. So I'm no stranger to this stuff either, and we've got Andy as well. So we will answer to you. We will inform you as much as you possibly want, and we will make sure that that every single dollar is well spent to the very, very best of our ability. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any other speakers? I don't see any.
Yeah, just one, Jeff.
Ewan, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I intend to support this, and I wasn't going to speak, but Mark made me speak because I think, in somewhat, he highlighted one of my concerns, and I don't think he meant to make that error, but it was just to highlight he used again this emotive issue of food, people being desperate to get access to things like food. I just remind him again that yesterday our government came out and well-resourced civil defence to put in place just that purpose. If you're at home today and you cannot get the food you need, and if you cannot get the medicines you need, you call an 0800 number, and if you meet the criteria, you're going to be looked after. My point to Mark is, I just want to make sure that the people who are coming to us have either been vetted by that process and have been determined that they don't meet the criteria, and as long as they meet our broader criteria, they're looked after. I just go back to the same point. All the experience you've had is useful, but it's going to have to be dynamic and it's going to have to be time relative, and the circumstances keep changing. And so just yesterday, you'll see that a lot of these organizations have been focusing on food, and they've now suddenly discovered the government is focusing on food and that they're doing that. I just don't want us to be duplicating, because our $1 million is hard to find, and I would hate to think that we spend it all in one go and then find actually we haven't really addressed some of the long-term issues. So it's just a reminder that we have to be mindful of what everybody else is doing when you make your decisions.
Thank you, Ewan. Any other speakers? A right or reply, Mark?
No, good, thanks. And thanks, Ewan. Taken on board, bud.
Okay, so I'll put the motion 3A, B, C, and... Oh, sorry. Oh, are you voting, Martin?
I've pressed my vote button already. I'll recast it. I miss those voting buttons in the chamber, but it's all right. I'm learning how to use the hand now.
Absolutely. All good. I'll put the motion, those four. That seems to be everyone. There was no one against? Okay, thank you. That seems to be unanimous.
Yeah, motion is carried unanimously. Thank you.
All right, thank you, councillors. Our next one is item 9, I think, and that's the late report on a separate document. So I'll just give you a moment to dig that out while I do it as well.
Is this the delegations policy one?
That's right, that's right. Right, has everybody managed to find it? Yes? Okay, all right. So we've got staff recommendations there, and who's going to speak to this? Which staff members? Chris?
If I can start, there's two probably speakers to this part of the delegation chain is for Jen. So Jen hopefully is on the line and can jump on that. I'll deal with the contract delegation variation that we talked about. So look, we have revised the report since we had some councillors' feedback at the briefing on Monday or earlier in the week. And what we have done at this time, we're not proposing to progress an increase in the general delegation of the CEO to award contracts from $3 million to $10 million. We've deferred asking for this increase until we get to the point in time where it becomes more apparent that the current delegation is sort of limiting our ability to be agile and efficient. So we're not at that point of time yet. So we'll just monitor that and come back to council if it is limiting our ability. What we do want to progress with is the one change to the CE's delegation to award contracts that don't go to tender. So we want to progress a lift in that limit from the current $250,000 to the CEO's current contract limit of $3 million. So just a reminder to council, this delegation is a process matter that speaks to efficiency and agility at a time when the organisation is just extremely busy. it's not about funding or which projects we progress. The CE can only exercise this delegation on projects that are approved and funded by council decisions. So it comes with the added requirement of reporting in terms of reporting to councillor every occasion that the CEO exercises this delegation. So I'm happy to leave the matter there and to just be open for questions.
Thank you, Chris. We've got Rob.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor and Chair. A couple of questions. One, and I hope I've read this right, but in respect to the civil defence regulations, given that the current state of emergency is not a response to an urgent or immediate catastrophic event, is there a reason why whoever the controller happens to be at the time would make decisions without perhaps reference back to the mayor or her nominee?
I'll take that, Councillor Rob. So it would be, so the usual practice and what would happen in an ordinary situation is that the controller would speak to the chief executive or the mayor, depending on what was happening at the time. Those delegations are really in place so that if it's the middle of the night and they can't get hold of anybody and a decision needs to be made really quickly, that they have the delegation to do just that. The challenge with the delegation that we have for civil defence right now is that when a controller is in place who's currently from the Waikato District Council controller, when they are in place, they have absolutely no delegation at all. So our delegation is for the Hamilton City Controller and the Waikato Regional Controller only. And because of the new way that the region have brought groups of territorial authority emergency management systems together to manage the sustainability of the people across time for these, it means that we potentially have a gap when the Waikato controller is in charge, as opposed to when our two controllers are in charge. That's the nature of the change that we're looking at for civil defence.
Okay, so how would we know that the controller in charge, if it is something that is of a high degree of urgency, would not consider waking up the mayor or her nominee or whoever is in the next line of command to seek at least a second opinion as to what he or she might be doing at that particular time?
Sure. I mean, as I said earlier, that what would happen, what best practice would be for larger contracts and larger spends, is that wherever possible that would happen. The delegation is in place where it can't.
Okay, all right. Okay, understand that. Second question, and this might be perhaps to Chris rather than to you, is I'm unsure why the staff are ignoring the advice of the external chair of audit and risk when I'm reading paragraphs 22 and 23, and this is in regard to perhaps having at least some elected member involvement in decisions around the level of discretion that the CE might now have in this move from 250,000 to 3 million, and the potential now, after Chris's explanation a little earlier today, that in future we might need to move that even higher than the $3 million.
Yep, Councillor. What staff are seeking is something that gives us the maximum agility and efficiency through this period. So that's clearly a process where we engage with the CEO exclusively. We will not be shortcutting sort of processes that we follow to get to the CEO. And as we talked about in the briefing, the other day. It goes through sort of 3 approval processes from project manager up to GM up to Richard with the reporting. So the simple answer, we're just looking for maximum efficiency and agility through this period.
Do you see some impediment, and after having gone through all those processes, that the CE would then be hamstrung to have to contact 2 other people, in this case the 2 elected members suggested by the chair of Audit and Risk, or at least a discussion to get some consensus?
Councillors, that process would work. It just adds another layer, and that just detracts from efficiency and agility. But it would work as suggested by the chair of Audit and Risk. So clearly, that's a decision for council today.
Yeah. When have you got in mind when you think the $3 million might be insufficient? The $3 million level of discretion, given our discussion yesterday about the possibility of wanting to move that even higher?
Yeah, look, I think that will come when we start getting some indication from government on all of the packages we're putting together for funding on additional things. So as you know, there's a number of things happening, some about immediate things in the transport corridor. So if funding comes to start that process, I would imagine that would be really useful to have a higher delegation at that point in time so we can move quickly. So that package is moving immediately out of lockdown into increased activity on our transport corridor, such as more work on footpaths, vegetation control, etc. That package. Clearly, if government respond to any of our shovel-ready packages as well, they are quite larger in contract value, and it might be appropriate there. But on reflection, it would be good to hold fire on increasing that delegation until we just understand what council want to do and what their response is to moving forward on what work we want to do.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Look, I've got an amendment which I'm signalling, but I'm happy to hold that until we've had the other questions.
Okay, we will take some other questions then in the meantime. Martin.
Yes, look, just following up, Rob has asked most of my questions, but item 22, where we talked about the chair of our Strategic Risk and Insurance Committee recommendations in terms of the that recommendation in item 22. Chris, don't you think it's significant that you have not consented to that advice or agreed with that advice? I thought if we have a chair for audit and risk, that's a pretty significant piece of advice, respectfully.
Yeah, councillor, it's not that I'm not consenting to it. I'm just advising council it would be more efficient for us for the CEO to have that exclusive right to exercise the delegation. We can make it work in accordance with that paragraph. It's just a little bit less agile and efficient for us in this time.
Would you agree when the chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee gives us a set of advice, that is a very significant set of advice, and as a governance team we need to ponder that very comprehensively?
That's for something you as a governance team to consider. Like I'm very happy that we've got very robust procedures in place at staff to get to the CEO level, but you know we can make that work if that's the will of elected members.
Sure. So, and I'm just getting a concept so I get this really understood around delegations and an emergency in the middle of the night. Would it be fair to say that the Prime Minister of New Zealand or the President of the US, whatever, would expect the phone call to go at 3 o'clock in the morning if there was a matter of huge significance? We're just talking about the interaction of leadership and the mayor of the day in this case, or whatever. I'm just a little bit worried about how we define delegation a wee bit. It just seems to me a phone call is still pretty nimble.
Councillor Gallagher, I agree with you. I agree with you on that, and I think wherever possible, these things can and will happen. I mean, our controllers take their responsibilities to the civil defence emergency very seriously, and this delegation is just extending the delegation that we already have for our controllers to the other people that may from time to time be at the helm of our emergency response at the moment. But yes, I take your point and agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We've got Sarah.
Thanks, Jeff. A couple of my questions have been answered, but just in regard to the contractual stuff, Chris, I'm just wanting to clarify it says that, obviously this is not delegating to make decisions around projects that aren't already funded, but is there any risk that, say, if we're changing priorities in the annual plan around some of these capital projects or in the LTP, that we could be locked into projects without kind of realising it before we've had that opportunity to reassess some of these capital projects?
I don't think so, Councillor. Like in the current situation we're in now and putting forward shovel-ready projects, a lot of our imminent projects will be in that list for your visibility. So I would expect that we'll be getting guidance from you over the next short while on all of our projects and which ones you want to proceed with at this time. So I don't see that as a significant risk at all.
So this will be primarily focusing on those projects that we're putting forward to central government for as shovel-ready projects.
No, it's focused on every thing we do. For instance, we our city waters team are just sort of smashed at the moment and responding to the emergency services, but they have a lot of contracts for maintenance works at the wastewater treatment plant, pump supply, those types of things, which go over the CEO delegation for negotiated supply. So it's for this would apply to any contract we let, not just the shovel-ready contracts. So we've got a lot of operational contracts that we need to keep moving to just respond to the situation and business as usual.
I guess I'm just keen for us to be clear or mind, that we're not going to end up in a situation where we aren't able to reshuffle some of these annual plan projects as we've previously discussed.
Yeah. So look, just to be clear, this is about essentially not going to tender. It's not really about the contract limits. If we went to tender, the chief executive's already got delegation to approve contracts up to 3 million if we went to tender. So this is purely about efficiency around tendering and being able to negotiate with suppliers up to that $3 million to make sure we first mover advantage in securing suppliers as we move into the new normal. So, yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit clearer. Thank you.
Councillors, we've got 2 more questions coming. I'm mindful that Rob has signalled that he wants to put up an amendment.
Which I'll second.
Okay, so I'm suggesting we do that now, get that on the table so we can all see it, get Rob to speak to it just very briefly to explain it, and then continue.
Can I ask a question? Or have you got me or not?
You're there, but I thought we might get the amendment on the table first.
Oh, and then questions. Okay.
Yeah, cool. All right, Rob, what have you got, Rob?
Becca, are you able to put it up on the screen?
I'll just check with the team. Here we go. It's on its way.
I can read it out. There we are. There we are. It really is along the lines of what we're discussing, and that is that where we have contracts with a value of greater than 250,000, which is the present level of delegation, increasing that to 3 million. So when it's above the 250,000 and it hasn't gone out to tender, then the chief executive needs to consult, in this case with the chair of the Finance Committee and the chair of Infrastructure Operations Committee to get a decision by consensus.
Okay, I will second that with an amendment. Whether I'd like to foreshadow, I'll just talk to you, Rob, about it, Rob, but I would like to put in there the chair or deputy chair.
Oh yeah, no, look, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with.
So Paula, you want to put in what? Sorry.
Add the deputy chair, the mayor or deputy chair. The mayor or deputy mayor. Sorry, I meant.
Okay. Or the mayor, not the deputy chair.
Sorry, no, the mayor or deputy mayor.
So you want all of those, so you need 4 people, 5 including the chief executive.
Well, no, more than that, no, but mayor or deputy mayor.
Okay.
So there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 of you.
4, okay, that's fine with me.
So I have a question there. Does that mean that all 4 have to be present or involved, or can there be some sort of quorum situation? You know, because getting all 4 people in the room might be, or all four people at once might be a challenge.
Yep. I guess we're looking for it by consensus. It may be that the CEO might just deliver a 1-page document, and we could agree. By memorandum. I don't know. Hadn't thought of that.
But sorry, question to you.
Sorry, I just thought he would meet with the 2 chairs. In this case, just with the 2 chairs, and if 2 of the 3 of us agreed, then it would go ahead.
So can I just, I know, sorry to jump back in, but because I was out, but I'm aware that Auckland declined to give their chief executive the further delegations, and what they put in was a committee of their mayor and financial couple of portfolios. So that's very similar to what we're proposing here, and theirs is about 5 or 6 strong, I believe, and that's the way they're going. I think I'm happy to consider a what do you call it, a quorum of 2, any 2 of those being able to come together. That so it's all or 2, whatever's the greater.
Rob, would you consider that?
Yeah, that's 2 plus the chief executive, is it?
Yeah.
Yep. That's fine.
Excuse me, it's hard because obviously I can't see anyone else. I've indicated a hand raised, so as long as you've got that.
All right. Well, so there we are. We'll just finish this and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah.
So that would make it with a quorum of 3, which of course always is going to include the deputy, the chief exec, isn't it?
Can I just maybe suggest that we put consensus by the majority?
Just by majority.
Yeah, I think we head into
maybe remove consensus and say by the majority.
Yeah.
So sorry, Becca. I think the quorum is a better one because the issue is if you can't get all 4 together. So then the majority, if you can't get one of them there, the majority doesn't work. I think the quorum sounds better approach to me.
I just have some concerns. Mothler may be able to jump in just around the connotation of quorum and committee, and whether we need this as a group or a committee. Just need to be clear because how we manage it will depend on what it's going to be going forward.
Could you put by a consensus of at least 3 of the named panel?
Is Mothler on the line?
I am on the line. Can you hear me? I think I've unmuted myself.
Yes.
So I don't have a concern that this would be seen as an official committee because we're not establishing it as such, and so I don't think there's any issue with setting up a quorum or a minimum number. You could say by the majority, and then you could have a comma, and where not all members of the group are able to meet, then you could have your minimum there. So if it's 2 plus the CE or what have you, so are not able to meet, the decision may be made by
a minimum of 2 elected members.
yes, and the chief executive, and then whoever was acting as chief executive, if the CE is unable to act, would sit in that role. So I think that covers it.
Okay, so that's a mouthful, but there we go. So, mover and seconder, are you happy with this?
Yeah.
Jeff, I really finding this frustrating because I'm trying to ask a question. Have you got us a list of questioners?
Yeah, all right. Well, we're just trying to find.
Okay, that's fine. Now it's all good. Now I can see myself. It's okay.
Okay, so we'll now go to Margaret, who's been very patiently waiting.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I was about to second that before you jumped in, Paula, but I just wanted to ask the question about why the significance of the 30th of June, Chris, if you're able to clarify that.
I think the date was should be 30th of June, hopefully the end of the financial year. So it was just to take us through to the end of the financial year.
Okay, and I mean, we've already gone with the amendment, so, or we already have an amendment on the table, I should say. So, but I did want to ask, I mean, you talked very strongly about efficiency and agility. So what do you mean by efficiency? Are you talking about, presumably you're talking about timeframes and being able to get hold of people in a timely enough manner or in an urgent enough manner? So what are you talking about here? Are you talking about minutes or hours or?
What I'm talking to is our ability to start engaging with suppliers with the view that we don't have to put them through a tender process, that we have an ability to negotiate just on a single tender basis. So it gives us the confidence to start those conversations with suppliers and then to follow the process to get them approved. So if we have a risk of not being able to negotiate, I think we'll just be disadvantaged in the market we're moving into.
But can't that happen in the background with or without elected members taking part in the final decision?
Yeah, look, part of that is just the process requirements to take it up through council as well. Like we are, we're really smashed sort of at a staff level and just dealing with matters at the moment. So it adds a lot of process for us to take it up.
Okay. Righto, thanks for that explanation. That's all. Thanks, Jeff.
Happy for you to move it, second it if you'd like, Margaret. I'm more than happy.
Oh, look, no worries. There was just an email trail this morning, that was all.
Okay, cool. Didn't see that.
Okay.
Is there any other question? Are you still running the meeting, Jeff?
Who's chairing the meeting?
Jeff is.
Jeff's talking, but he's not. He's only mouthing. He's got to take himself off mute.
I'm muted. Some noise in my kitchen. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, Paula, did you?
You're chairing to the end of this item, so you may as well continue.
All right.
Paula, question?
No, I'm fine with it now.
Oh, your hand's still there.
No questions.
Martin.
Sorry.
Yes, look, I'm just trying to be helpful here. The preference is always to have in my view, it would be a minimum of 3. Why would we not just have the deputy mayor anyway? So basically, if say infrastructure finance can't do it, it just means that we're better to have 3. But I'm cool, whatever. If one of you comes incapacitated, it's not ideally just to have chief executive and one other, but or 2 others. But that's a thought. That's all.
In terms of mayor and deputy mayor, I think Jeff and
I would just have mayor and deputy mayor. It just means you've got a pool of 4, and if someone else can't make it, you at least have 3 in there. That's all. I'm not dying in the ditch.
You're muted, Jeff.
You're mute.
Sorry, I had to do. Okay, no other questions? All right, so we have got an amendment, which actually is a motion because the staff motion hasn't been moved. So, we've got the motion on the table from Rob, and we'll take Rob. Would you like to speak to it first?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, and that is, look, Chris, thanks, and Jen, thank you.
Point of order, Rob. Sorry, I'd like to move the staff motion.
Okay.
Is that the amendment now?
That's fair.
Do you have a second?
Amendment. Not yet.
I'll second that.
So now you get both to talk to it, and then.
Yep. Okay. So, so which one goes first? The
Rob, go.
Right. So Rob, you go first then.
Okay. All right.
Rob,
So,
yours is the amendment. Yes. Is that right?
well, I don't know. It got moved first, but
it's the motion. It got moved first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want me to clarify what we're doing, Jeff, or you?
Yes,
please. Just clarify who speaks first.
Yeah. So Councillor Rob will speak first as mover of the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Look, thanks, Chris and Jen, for responding to the questions that we had. I'm in awe of the wonderful work that you and the rest of the team are doing to manage the situation that we're in now. And I accept that we have got in place some very robust procedures around procurement and around the way that we bring contracts to, and have done in the past, bring contracts to council meetings. And I really can't think of better ways that many of these contracts have been presented to us in the past. And I would expect that to continue in future. But I do feel very uncomfortable if we ignore the advice of the Chair of Strategic Risk and Assurance. And we do that at our own peril because we're working under even more pressure at the moment, and that will probably continue, I believe, at least for the next 6 months. There's also the thought that we may need to look, and certainly looking at the very detailed notes that Blair presented us with last night, it's likely that we will be looking at some quite significant value contracts in the foreseeable future, both on our own and in partnership with central government. So I think that we will find that that $3 million that is being sought now will fade, and we will be looking at significantly higher amounts going forward. So in terms of accountability and at least giving a degree of comfort for governance, I believe that this option now, currently, is the best and only option that we should be considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think I've got a speaking list here. Dave.
Thank you. I totally appreciate the intent of the motion and the movers of it, and support the principle that they're after. However, the motion when you look at it and the sorry?
You're just cutting out, Dave.
Can you hear me?
Sporadically. Dave, we might have to come back to you.
Yes.
Okay, we'll give Dave another go shortly. Sarah, I've got you on the list.
No, that was for earlier for questions, sorry.
Okay, all right. Martin.
Yes, I'm wondering, I see Dave moving. I'm wondering, in fairness to the mover of the amendment, if we could try Dave again before me.
Yeah,
we give him another go?
Dave, do you want another crack, eh? You're muted.
Yeah, I was just saying, good on you. I hope you can hear me. Sorry about this.
No, we're losing you again. Sorry, Dave.
Jeff, do you think maybe
might have
Dave
Becca
could
gets
call in
Dave
or
to phone
something?
in. Becca gets Dave to phone in.
That's a good idea.
Using the phone app. Okay.
Did you hear that, Dave? Maybe phone in and...
Yeah, Councillor Dave, if you maybe hang up this call and phone back via your mobile phone through the link there, that may be helpful.
Yeah, I wonder if it's actually not the internet, it's the fact he's wearing a tie, because that could be choking him. I've never seen that before.
Okay, here he goes. You're in, Dave.
You got him on speakerphone, Jeff? Someone?
I've admitted him. I don't know about the speaker.
I think move through to the next person, Councillor Taylor, and we'll try and get Councillor McPherson back shortly.
All right, Martin, you're next.
Yes, it's very hard not to have Dave's great words, obviously, because I'm sure he's going to give some really good and decisive arguments. However, I'm obviously at this point in time inclined to support obviously the motion, and I pick up our Chair of Finance's strong observations, particularly in terms of our external, audit and risk and committee, and I think the committee of 3 will be sufficiently nimble. I do acknowledge in matters of this type, of course, you want mayoral office oversight, so to have either the mayor or the deputy mayor, I'm quite relaxed about. And obviously, I've also made the point in terms of the general issue of the 3 o'clock morning phone call to certain people, particularly the mayor of the day, is also important where relevant. So I'm awaiting keenly the amendment mover to talk about his reasoning, but I'll support Councillor Pascoe's motion at this point.
Thank you, Martin. I'm not sure if we're ready for Dave yet.
I can hear you, Jeff.
Okay, we can hear you now.
I don't know about the video, but if you can hear me, that's all I need. Thanks. Mm-hmm. And sorry about the tie, Bunty. Look, I appreciate the intent of the motion's movers and share their feelings about that principle. But when you look at the wording of the resolution, it became bigger than Ben-Hur, and there was all such a tortuous wrangling about consensus and majorities and things, and those two are mutually exclusive, by the way. We're not dealing with new items at this point. And I believe the staff have been acting honourably and expeditiously. What we're going to do is slow up the process with the motion, unfortunately. I would rather, at this point, allow staff to expand their delegations just a little bit because they're dealing with items that are already approved. If, as Rob points out, we may get new contracts arising from government approvals for further work or for fast-tracking work, then I think we come back and revisit how we do that. But at the moment, I'm sorry that the motion is actually sorting out a delegation on the fly, like designing a leaflet by a committee, and it hasn't actually worked and is not going to make us as agile as we ought to be able to be.
Thank you, Dave. We have Margaret.
Thank you. I'm supporting the motion. I think over the last week or so, since we've been in lockdown, we've really showed how efficient and how agile and nimble we can be as a group of 13 plus. I don't see a much smaller delegation of a mayor or deputy plus 2 other councillors and the CEO is going to be as cumbersome and as slow-paced as what Councillor McPherson is suggesting. I think it's really important during these times that we do share that responsibility, especially when we're talking about a delegation increasing from 250,000 to 3 million and potentially more. At the end of the day, it is we as councillors that will be held responsible for any spending, and I'm not questioning the capability, the intent, the honourability or anything of staff at this point. It's merely a case, I believe, of sharing the load of responsibility, and it's not going to be at the cost of efficiency or agility. As I said before, we've already demonstrated a number of times how quickly we can all get together and make those calls. But I think in these times, when largely the environment is changing daily, we still need to have checks and balances. We still need to have good process. And I think having elected members and senior elected members helping us make these decisions is the most prudent thing to do.
Thank you, Margaret. Mayor Paula.
Thank you, everyone. Just supporting the motion of Pascoe's motion, because I did seek advice after we spoke about it prior to get independent risk and audit to express their feedback, and Karen was quite clear that she was nervous both of the going from 3 to 10 million, which we didn't, but she also thought the threshold of 3 million still required governance oversight. And we've seen some other councils in their making their decisions agree on the same thing. We do communicate well. I think we will communicate well. I don't think it's going to be too much of a drama to get 3 or 4 of us together to do this business in the short term. And of course, when we all come back together to formal council arrangements, so we'll go back to business as usual and it'll go through the right committees. So I think we can be agile. I think this council has called out to be included and involved in democracy at every level, and they didn't want any of their democratic rights or opportunities to have oversight of the work taken from them, and this is a way to ensure that in this instance it isn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I'll just have a quick say myself. I hold a slightly different view, and right from the start, I was reasonably relaxed about this because I do see the need for agility in this area, and I'm supportive of us trying to find a mechanism that is as streamlined as possible. This is an extreme situation, this environment that we're in. We as a council will need to act quickly, get things done for the city and for the community. And I mean, we are in unprecedented times. We're in a state of emergency. And I do recognise the need to do things a little differently here, and the pressure that staff and senior staff such as Chris are under. I don't actually see in this situation a need to have the amount of protection that we're putting up. I think it's a little unwieldy. I agree with Councillor McPherson on that. I remind you that the funding for these things is in place already. We've agreed to the funding. It's just staff trying to find a quicker way to be a little bit more agile in this very, very extreme situation. So I have the greatest respect for the Chair of Insurance, Karen Horn, and her comments, but on this particular one, I'm happy with this. I support what staff are trying to do. Ewan.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'll be supporting Councillor Pascoe's motion. I think at the end of the day, we are in unprecedented circumstances, and yes, we are in a state of emergency. And I also agree, actually, what we've just seen in terms of the redrafting of this motion on the hoof was a little bit. It goes to the very heart of some of the comments about how poorly we've managed that process. But having said that, I think that just tracks away from the fact that actually when it comes to communication amongst us, we have shown our ability to be agile and communicate effectively and efficiently and under urgency. There's a perverse sense of enjoyment to think that Rob Pascoe and others will have to go to bed at night with their phones on, so that in a case that there is an emergency, that they are immediately available to answer that phone. But all joking aside, this is what we get paid for. This is our job. We're elected members of local government. We show leadership. We respond to crises. The staff have done an amazing job of enabling us to communicate efficiently and effectively through the use of Zoom and other means. This is when we stand up and be accountable and available. And I truly believe, and I have huge regard for Richard. Richard knows that. And I have huge regard for Chris. But actually, we're elected, and I think it's really important that we play a role, and we can do it efficiently. So I intend to support Councillor Pascoe. I think we can react quickly and timely and give the CEO the comfort that he has the political wing with him, and give the comfort to the people of Hamilton that we, the elected members, are doing our job and that we've responded to the crisis when called.
Thank you, Ewan. Do we have any other speakers before we go to Rob's right of reply? Not seeing any? Okay.
Jeff, not speaking, but I just emailed through. There are a couple of things in the amendment that didn't fully make sense grammatically, so it might be good to amend those, Amy or Becca.
Yeah, we will. We always make sure that they make correct sense afterwards. It's just on the fly. Sometimes we get it a little bit
there's like a double negative in there. So.
Yeah. No, rest assured, we will be making sure it's absolutely 100% correct.
Okay.
No, it's nothing material in that, Sarah. It's just.
I think the intention there is clear. It's just there's an extra not or something. So it's when they're not able to not make. Yeah.
Oh, double negative. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Rob, would you like your right to reply?
Yeah, thank you very briefly, and thanks, Sarah, for the comments. I think the motion has got a little bit clumsy in terms of its wording, and that wasn't where it sort of started off from. But look, I've got no wish to reduce the agility of council to get on with work that they can and are able to do in a time when we need to be stimulating our local economy. I accept the comments from the Deputy Mayor and from Councillor Dave that these are not new projects, that the items are already included and there is some funding in the long-term plan. But what we're doing here is we're moving away from our normal procurement processes, and it may be that we could end up with paying higher, certainly different costs than we might have had in terms of our using our normal procurement charges. So that is where my concern is, and certainly I would want to think twice about working against the advice of the Chair of Strategic Risk and Assurance. A fresh pair of eyes is always desirable, both for the comfort of the CEO and for governance. And I would hope that this is not intended to be a criticism of Richard's ability and the trust that we have for him to do this job, but it may also give him a degree of comfort if he's had a chance just to run the details past at least some of the members of governance. So I'm asking members if they would please support the motion.
Thank you for that, Rob. Right, so we're now in a position where we will put the amendment, Councillor McPherson's amendment. Does everybody know what they're voting for? Yep. Okay, so I will put the amendment. Those in favour, raise their hands. There'll be quite a few of us here. I can't see the other screen. I'm sorry, Becca. Have you?
You can swipe it across. Can you?
Swipe across.
So hang on, I'll count it for you, Jeff. I'm not one of them. It's you, Jeff Taylor, Angela O'Leary, Dave McPherson.
Well, there's heaps. Okay, no, thank you. Those against?
So we've got myself, Maxine, Ewan, Ryan, Rob, Martin, Mark, Sarah, and Margaret.
Right. So that is lost, Becca, by...
Yep, so the amendment is lost, 3 for, 10 against.
All right. Okay, so now we'll put the motion, put Rob's motion. Those in favour?
All in favour? So I've got myself, Maxine, Ewan, Ryan, Rob, Martin, Jeff, Mark, Angela, Sarah, Margaret, and Dave.
Is anyone against?
No.
Okay. All right. So that.
Yep. So the motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, thank
you. Thank you all. Look, Paula, you might want to take over. I need a bathroom break.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks for sharing. Okay, so we're actually going to be finished in a very few minutes because it's just moved that we exclude the public, and then we've got a couple of minutes to approve, and we're done. Is that right, Becca?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
yeah, we've got two items in public excluded: the minutes and the chair's report.
Yeah, they're pretty straightforward, I hope. So I move, and Maxine seconds, that we move into public excluded. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. So now we're in public excluded. Is everyone else off the call that should be off the call?